A frozen camera, a final image, and 9 lives lost to the cold. In 1959, 9 Soviet hikers vanished in Russia's Ural Mountains. What they left behind didn't make sense. A tent ripped open from the inside, footprints in the snow leading into the dark, bodies scattered across the slope, half-dressed, some with injuries that couldn't be explained, and among their belongings, a roll of undeveloped film. One photo stood out, frame 34, the last picture they ever took. A blur, a light, a mystery sealed in silver nitrate. And for decades, we've stared into that frame, looking for meaning, for warning, for truth. This is the Dyatlov Pass Incident revisited. And this time, we're asking what the final photo really reveals. This is Mind Veil, where mystery meets memory, and the veil between them is always just a little too thin. They weren't amateurs, they weren't thrill seekers, they were students, engineers, athletes, led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a meticulous planner with a reputation for doing things by the book. 10 set out. Only one, Yuri Yudin, turned back early due to illness. The others pressed on. Their goal? Earn a Grade 3 hiking certification, the highest the Soviet Union offered. A badge of pride in a system built on discipline. They wrote in journals, laughed, took photos in the snow. Nothing about their journey seemed extraordinary until it became a national mystery. And those images they left behind, including one final frame, became part of something much larger. If stories like this keep you thinking, you might want to follow along. Because here at Mind Veil, we don't chase fear, we chase understanding. The search team expected to find survivors. What they found was something else entirely. The tent was collapsed, half buried in snow, sliced open from the inside, as if something had driven them out in the dead of night. Footprints led away, some barefoot, some wearing only socks, some with no shoes at all. They stretched into the forest, then vanished beneath the snow. 2 bodies were found near a fire, huddled together, frost-bitten, barely clothed. 3 more were scattered between the tent and the trees, as if they were trying to crawl back to survive. And months later, in a ravine half buried in snow, they found the rest. Broken bones, crushed ribs, one with her tongue missing, another without eyes. No signs of struggle, no evidence of an attacker, just cold, silence, and fear frozen in place. And then there was the camera, recovered from the snow, its film still intact, cold preserved like the story itself. When investigators developed the negatives, they found what you'd expect. Smiling faces, mountain views, quiet moments before everything changed. But one photo stood apart. Frame 34. The last image. Blurry, dark, a streak of light against a black sky. No people, no landscape, just motion. Some say it shows glowing orbs in the sky. Others think it was a flashlight swinging in panic, or the blinding flash of something unknown. It doesn't give answers, it only asks questions. And still, decades later, people are staring at that single frame, trying to see what they saw in the final moments of their lives. Stick with this story, because what comes next has divided experts, skeptics, and searchers of truth for over 60 years. Here's what we know. The photo is real, developed in 1959 from a camera found near the bodies. It was the last frame on the roll. The conditions were freezing. The camera likely operated under stress. Mechanical, environmental, or emotional. Those are the facts. But speculation? That's where things spiral. Some believe it shows military flares. Others claim it captured a missile test. There are those who swear it's proof of a UFO caught in a split-second moment of panic. None of these ideas have been confirmed. No physical evidence backs them. Photography experts point to simpler causes: accidental exposure, a light source in motion, even a shutter pressed while fleeing in the dark. But when everything else is missing, even a blur becomes a clue. Or at least, we need it to be one. Because without meaning, the story is harder to live with. Officially, the case is closed. In 2020, the Russian government reopened the investigation and concluded it was an avalanche. They claimed a slab of snow collapsed onto the tent, forcing the hikers to flee in darkness, barefoot in sub-zero temperatures. Plausible, but not complete. There was no avalanche debris. The slope was too shallow, and experienced hikers like Dyatlov wouldn't have pitched their tent in an active risk zone. Other scientists proposed katabatic winds, powerful air currents that crashed down mountainsides, loud enough to sound like a train, strong enough to rip through tents. Another theory? Infrasound, low-frequency wind vibrations that can cause confusion, anxiety, even panic. These ideas are rational, rooted in science. But none of them explain everything. Not the crushed bones, not the missing eyes, not the silence. Sometimes the neatest answers leave behind the biggest shadows. Where science ends, speculation begins. And in the Soviet Union of 1959, there was no shortage of things people weren't allowed to ask about. Some believe the hikers stumbled into a restricted military zone where tests were being conducted that no one was supposed to see. There were reports of lights in the sky that night, some from nearby towns, others written in the hikers' own journals. Later, investigators found trace radiation on some of the clothing, and strangely, one of the hikers had worked in a nuclear facility. Another had family tied to classified projects. Then there's the parachute mine theory. Airborne explosives tested by the military that detonate mid-air, causing massive internal injuries without external wounds. Convenient or concerning? None of this is proven, but in a system built on secrecy, even missing information starts to feel like a clue. We stare at the final photo because it stares back, blurry, ambiguous, silent, and yet it speaks to something ancient in us, a need to understand what can't be seen. Psychologists call it closure-seeking behavior. The brain craves endings. It wants patterns, causes someone to blame. That blurry streak of light, it becomes a symbol of fear, of warning, of the moment everything changed. We project meaning onto the image because it's all we have. No witnesses, no confession, just snow silence and one shutter click. We can't explain. The photo becomes a mirror, and what we see in it often says more about us than it ever could about them. If this moment has made you think deeper, pause and hit the like button. That's how we grow this project and keep asking the questions no one else wants to. Before they became a mystery, they were just people. Zenaida Kolmogorova was kind, sharp-witted, always writing in her journal. Rustem Slobodin was a long-distance runner, quiet and dependable. He once played mandolin on a frozen trail just to lift the group's spirits. Lyudmila Dubinina had stood up to Soviet officials when she thought something was unjust. They weren't chasing danger, they were chasing growth, testing themselves against the wild. They told jokes, took photos, wrote about meals, the cold of each other. There's something sacred about those journal entries, like echoes of lives that had no idea they were ending. This isn't just a cold case, it's a time capsule. And the most haunting part might not be how they died, but how quickly the world forgot who they were. The story didn't stay buried in the snow. It evolved. In Cold War Russia, it became a whisper dash, a cautionary tale about secrecy and silence. In the post-Soviet years, it became a symbol of mistrust, of questions the government wouldn't answer. And in the age of the internet, it became something else entirely. A legend, a riddle, a Reddit thread with no ending, documentaries, dramatizations, podcasts dissecting every frame, every footprint, every journal entry. Each generation rediscovers it and sees something different in the dark. The Dyatlov Pass isn't just a place anymore, it's a narrative mirror for fear, control, and the unknown. And at the center of it all, that final photo, still blurry, still unexplained, still pulling us in. If this story is resonating with you, consider subscribing, not for answers, but for the questions that stay with us. But what if we've been asking the wrong question? What if the final photo isn't evidence, but accident? What if it wasn't a UFO, or a missile, or a moment of terror, but just a flashlight swinging on a strap as someone ran? What if that blur meant nothing at all? Because that's the thing about chaos. It doesn't leave patterns. It doesn't care what makes sense. And maybe that's what really haunts us. Not that something unnatural happened, but that something natural did. Random, unfair, uncontrollable. They did everything right. They stayed together. They planned, prepared, persisted, and still they didn't make it home. That truth dash, not a theory, not a secret, be the most terrifying part of all. We may never know what really happened on that mountainside. The theories will keep evolving. The files will stay incomplete. And the truth, if it ever existed, is buried beneath 60 years of snow, silence, and story. But maybe the value of the Dyatlov Pass isn't in solving the mystery. Maybe it's in remembering the people who lived it and reckoning with the uncomfortable truth that some questions don't have answers, that sometimes meaning is something we create just to survive. What doesn't make sense? That blurry photo won't reveal the secret, but it reveals something else. That memory and mystery often share the same frame, and that in the stillness between facts and fear, what endures is the asking. This is Mind Veil, where mystery meets memory, and the veil between them is always just a little too thin.